All right, welcome back. And this is going to be chapter 3. And we are going to be looking at a bunch of different things concerning the 3D industry. So, the first things, there's a couple things that I want to cover for this particular chapter. First, we're going to look at what it's like to actually work in the industry. All the things that you should probably know if this is going to be your career. Things that, they don't tell you ahead of time. And this is all kind of like the things that I wish I knew before going into a career in 3D, because a lot of those were kind of unexpected, and I just had to live with them, right? So hopefully you'll get after this a much better understanding of what the job actually is, what it is to actually work in this particular industry. And then after that, I'm going to kind of give you an overview of what it's like to like a day in the life. So what it was like to actually work inside a studio, like for me personally. A day is maybe not a good a good time frame, but I mean like a day or a week in the life of a 3D artist. And so I'll be able to do that for the two different studios that I worked on. And I've also worked in different teams, but from the more indie studio style that I had when I was back in Montreal versus the more like AAA, big production, big company kind of lifestyle. So we'll be able to look at both. And then after that, a couple more things I want to cover. Kind of what the career prospects are when it comes to a career in 3D. How do you level up? How do you where do you start, and where can you hope to end up? And and then also tips on how to stay relevant, because things move really, really quickly, and it's easy to be kind of like pushed off the train. So let's get started first. And we're going to start with what it's like to work in the industry. So first thing I want to show you is this map here. So this is GameDevMap.com. This is a map that's hopefully very important to you. So of course this didn't exist back in the days, but now it does, and it's super helpful. So it's a map of all the different 3D game studios, not 3D, but game studios that exist in the world right now. At least a good list of them. Maybe not all of them, but a really good list. So this includes all the studios that are 5 or more people, I believe, and that are actual game developers. So if you're an art outsourcing studio, for example, you do art for video game companies, you're not going to be included in here, but and like freelancers and individuals are also not represented in here. Obviously, that wouldn't make much sense. But those are all the companies. So wherever you are in the world right now, it's awesome to be able to look at this and kind of see what options are around you. And so that's always the first step when it comes to working in the industry, in this kind of industry. Unlike being a doctor or working at a restaurant or things like that, where you can find those absolutely anywhere you go in the world. 3D studios, not so much. They are located in certain areas of the world, and there are definitely more of those studios concentrated in different parts. So those are all the different cities with studios in them. And while this seems like it's spread out all over the place and kind of concentrated in Europe and in the North America, it's not quite like that. So obviously there are a lot of studios in Europe. But as far as like the really, really big gaming hubs, game development hubs, it would definitely be more around here. So LA, this area here. So California as a whole, actually, San Francisco too. So there's a ton of studios in here. So those three little dots here, you'll find a really, really good amount. So if you're here, if you're born here or if you live there, you're in luck, definitely, compared to if you're born somewhere in the in the South America. So your options here are not going to be that great. Same with Africa and pretty much anywhere else other than Europe. So yeah, so California is definitely one of the biggest hub. It's probably the biggest. And then there is also this area here, so Montreal. This is also a really, really big hub with a lot of companies. So Ubisoft is located there. All the big companies actually have a studio in Montreal, because it's a lot cheaper to develop games there. So those are all the, as you can see, all the different studios in Montreal. There's a really good amount of them, and a lot of really, really big ones too. So yeah, it's really, really interesting to look at this. So yeah, as I said, like the first thing that you want to do is, of course, wherever you are located in the world, make sure that there's something next to you. It might not happen. So I was really lucky to be born in Montreal. It also happened to be the one of the big hubs for game development. So there you go. And then yeah, when it comes to this list here, obviously this represents all kinds of different companies, and as I've kind of touched upon in the first chapter, there are a really, really kind of broad range of companies that you can find. So you'll have your really, really small indie studios working on like more obscure games, or just not obscure, but like games that don't have a lot of money, that are not backed with a lot of money. And then you'll have the much bigger companies, like like the AAA companies, or publishers like EA, Activision, Riot Games, Blizzard Entertainment. So those are all like really, really, really big studios that hire a lot of people. And the life, in those two types of environments are pretty different. So this is also something that you really need to look at, when you're looking at working in this industry. There, the lifestyle that you'll have depending on where you work is going to be very, very different. So if you like something that's a little bit more, I would say a little bit more stable, a little bit more like something you can build a career on, definitely a AAA studio is more like that. Because it's just a bigger machine, so it's much less likely that it'll fail and run out of money. So working in indie studios, it's super exciting. It's like the people that you work with, there's so few of them, at least for most indie studios, that it's a different vibe. It's more like a small family as opposed to more of like a community for bigger game studios. And having done both, there's pros and cons for both. So when you work at in a smaller team, there's a lot of stuff that you'll have to do that you wouldn't normally have to do for bigger companies. So as I said in the first chapter, you get to wear a lot more hats. You get to do a lot more of the different tasks. So if you're a 3D artist, you might be the only 3D artist on your team, so you will have to do everything for the game, everything that's visual, and that might include like the characters, environments, the props, and also like the special effects, the building the levels in the game. It might also include creating the UI for the game. So you might get the opportunity to do a lot of stuff. And as opposed to working at a big studio where you'll be very, very specialized and you won't get to do that many things. So and all these different studios, and all those different teams in those different studios also have very different art styles. So that's another thing. Like if you're gonna work in the industry, you want to work somewhere that you like, what they do, you like the art style, you like the kind of art that they do. So you have to be you have to look at that as well. So there's what I'm trying to say basically is that there's not that many options for you to choose from. So working in this industry, you will have to relocate. It's very likely, at least once in your career, if not more. I don't know anybody that never relocated. So it's just it's the studios. The studios are limited. The amount of places where you can work are limited. So if you want to find a good job, if you want to find something that's the opportunities might not be where you're located. So it's one of the things that you just it's hard to know ahead of time, but it's really like if you are attached to your family or to, if you have strong ties anywhere in the world and you want to go into this kind of industry, and you don't happen to live in a city where there's a lot of studios, that might be a problem. So relocation it will happen. So in my case, I relocated from Montreal to the US, to California. So for just a job opportunity, because I couldn't turn it down. And then yeah, I mean, that was my only move because it's the only company I switched to. But yeah, I know people that just move around all the time. They live in a bunch of different countries, and it's just kind of part of the career. It's just it's part of the game. It's part of the deal. So yeah, that is very important to know. And so I wanted to go back also to the indie versus AAA. There are a couple more things I wanted to talk about there. So especially perks, like working there, as I said, is different. You get to do different things, on your day-to-day kind of like schedule. So we know that, but there's also like the perks that come with it that are pretty different. So working at a big company, you get a lot of perks because they can afford it, and they can afford to pay you a lot of money. They want to retain you. If they're paying you a big salary, if they're giving you like a lot of opportunities to learn and things like that, they want to make sure that you keep working there, so that the money that they invest don't go to waste. So they will offer you a bunch more stuff than you would ever get into working at an indie studio. So for example, a couple things. There'll be like often a gym at work, or you'll get like a free gym membership. You'll get cheap meals because they'll have often a cafeteria on site, and if not, there's always like ways to get your meals cheaper. You get of course health insurance and things like that. You get just health benefit, and you also. So, for example, at Blizzard, they do this they have this Blizzard Academy where they invite a bunch of professionals from the different kind of fields, and they invite them to talk and then to teach basically Blizzard employees new skills, or teach them new things. So there's also like different classes that you can take. Where you'll have like a teacher come, and the class can last, like a couple of weeks, and then you go every couple of days. And they spend a lot of money on their employees because it's in their own benefit, in a sense. Like they're trying to level up their own employee so that they perform better, and eventually, hopefully, I guess they save money this way. But so it all goes to say, bigger companies, they just have a lot of money. Oh, and also, whenever there's a big lunch, for example, at Blizzard, you'll get, everybody goes to Vegas, and there's things like that, like big outings that the company can afford. Or, at Riot Games, for example, they went where, I think it was in the Caribbean, Dominican Republic or something like that. Big studios are pretty awesome to work at when it comes to perks. So, but on the other side, on the flip side, for indie studios, when it comes to working at an indie studio, there's not going to be much. So, you might work at a really small office to not spend too much time, not to waste too much money on like rent and things like that. And it'll be very limited, and you'll be lucky if there's any benefits included. So, of course, there's different kind of range of indie studios. There are those that are really, really small, like 5 employees, and there are bigger ones, so maybe like 14, 15, 20. But when you get to 20, it starts to you kind of need investment money from an outside source, so you start to transition to being a more like a bigger game studio at that point. But yeah, so there are pros and cons for each. Working at a smaller indie studio is more like working at a startup where there's a little bit more risk, but the reward can potentially be a little bit higher. So you're starting off a really small team, and then if the team actually ends up making a hit game, and then it turns into a AAA studio, then you might be one of the early members, and then that will give you like a good position for for later on, or and it's also it's you're working on a lot more things. You get to have a lot more ownership of the kind of stuff that you do, versus a AAA game where you have not as much ownership, but it is a lot more stable. So there are layoffs, but they're a lot more rare, and yeah, it's a little bit more of a stable job, so a little bit less risk and kind of like less reward, although the salary might often be higher. Yeah, so as far as the difference between the two, I think that covers pretty much it. That covers pretty much all of it. And one thing that they don't really tell you before you get into the business or when you get hired is that crunch. So crunch is a plague at every single studio that I know of, and people are generally just bad at managing time, and especially game producers. So, everybody always ends up at the end of their project where there's not enough time and like they screwed up the schedule or something, and then you have to deliver this amount of stuff in that amount of time, and it's always ridiculous. So people have to crunch. So that's just overtime. And oftentimes you're not paid for that, or if you are, you're not actually paid. You're paid in like vacation, but you can really never take that many vacations anyways. So, yeah, like if you are going to, if you're starting in this industry, it's really not that great of an idea to have a family. So not that you can get rid of it if you have one, but, like work-life balance when working at a game studio like this, it's not the best, especially if you're just starting, because, you're expected to kind of like prove yourself and do a little bit more time. So, and you will want to spend more time at work than everybody else so that you can kind of catch up. But yeah, so crunch is a thing. It's not fun. I've done way too much crunch, and it's one of the things that kind of pushed me out of the industry. So I left because it became that. That's not the only reason, obviously. Like I said, I have a company. I run a startup, so it's that's a big pull, but something that pushed me out, that helped push me out, is definitely crunch. So if you don't mind working, and when I was younger, I really didn't mind, because they, if you're working hourly, they do pay you. So I just ended up making more money, which was great. But the second you become kind of like salary and you're paid a fixed amount every year, then they just kind of they they tend to abuse you a little bit, since you're not really getting paid at this point when you crunch. So crunch, as I said, it's a thing, and be ready. Next up, let's talk about salaries. So there's a great website that you can go on. It's called Glassdoor. And here you can kind of look up at a lot of jobs and kind of their average salary and the range of salaries that you can expect depending on the location you're at. So let's do this. Blizzard Entertainment. So there you go. So this is this is an awesome website, and you should always look at this, especially if you're about to get a job offer or something like that, so that you know what to expect and if they're trying to lowball you. But as you can see here, depending on where you're working, the salary will be very, very different. So my salary in Montreal compared to in California was it's very, very different because of the cost of living. But as far as salaries in the 3D industry, it's hard to say, because as I said, it's highly dependent on your location and how big the studio is. But I can give you an idea of what it was for me. so when I was and from from what I know from other people working in the industry, in Montreal, for example, you will start with a salary of something like I think I don't know, maybe they go below that, but I've never heard of that. Like 37.5 thousand, like 37,000. That would be kind of like maybe 35. I don't know how you would be able to survive off of that, but yeah, like I would say 35 plus in Montreal is kind of what to be expected when you start. So as a junior, maybe 30 even for juniors. I don't know. Like I was never a junior, so I don't know. But when they hired me, yeah, I was 37.5. So that was 37.5 thousand per year, and so that's in Montreal. And of course, like after that, it keeps going up and up and up. And then if you're doing a really, really good job, you can always renegotiate for better salaries. That's all on you. But yeah, so in Montreal, that's about the starting salary versus the States in California, where it's about, at least here in Southern California, where the starting salary is about 45 to 50,000. So as you can see, it's a little bit higher, but the cost of living here is ridiculous. So I'm thinking it's almost less, in terms of how much you'll actually take away from that. So yeah, in California here, which is the biggest hub for 3D, that's what you would expect to start at. So like 45, 50, 55 if you're lucky, and then after that, it goes from there to infinity almost. If you're senior, you're likely making 100 grand and more. If you're leads, you might be in like 150, 180 range, depending on the studio. If you work at Blizzard or Riot, you might even reach like 200,000 with bonuses and things like that. And then art director, then you make even more, and then it goes up like quite a lot. But the range, the solid range for like a junior to senior in California is about 45 to like 150 to be realistic. Like that range is pretty good. So there's a good chance you'll end up somewhere in there. As you can see, it's a big range, so you can negotiate a lot if you're really good, and the big companies will pay that amount because they want you. Then in Montreal, the range will be a little bit less, obviously. Like the top will be like 80, I would say. So from 35 to 80,000, that'd be like kind of like the realistic range that you would be looking at, going into this. And then in Europe, I don't know. I would think it's similar to, at least from what I've heard, it's more in the range of the Montreal salaries. So California here, the cost of living here is really, really high. So they pay in accordance to that. But yeah, in Europe, I would say it's similar to Montreal in terms of income that you can expect. So. And also because there aren't that many huge studios, over there. So, yeah, as far as salaries, that's pretty much how it goes. And then, once you sign a contract and then you have, you have your salary coming in. After that, like how to make more, it's entirely up to you. So it's really. Video games is one of, I don't know, like I've only worked in video games, so I don't, like maybe it's the same everywhere, right? But, to make more money, you have to ask for more money. It's really, really rare that they'll promote you unless you ask for it, unless you're doing like a ridiculous job and it looks bad for them to not promote you. But yeah, you will always need to be asking for it. So, like every 6 months, you just like you kick butt, and then every 6 months you go and you're like, all right, so time for a raise, or I'm bouncing to somewhere else. So it's another thing where it's good to be in an area that has multiple studios, because then you can just leave. If they're not gonna give you a raise, or if you think you're worth more than you're actually getting paid. It doesn't come with your like education or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's like purely, strictly how you perform at work. So you might have a PhD in like in art or whatever, you'll still be making you'll still be making 40,000 when you start in a studio in Montreal. It's your education has nothing to do with it. It's just purely performance based, which is great because if you're good, you can ask for a lot. So there's three more things that I want to cover. So how you work as a team in a company, which is super important compared to a bunch of other different jobs, and then the different conventions that you should be looking at. Things that you should definitely look at, go to if you're in this industry or if you want to get into this industry. Those are really good places to kind of get introduced to people that can make a difference in your life. And then finally, health. So first, teamwork. Teamwork is it's the definition of a game studio. Like nothing, you cannot do anything unless everybody's working together. And just for anything that you do, anything that you touch in a company, at least a big company, so like a small indie studio, you might be able to have a lot more ownership over whatever you do. So you might, as I said, you do the entire pipeline on your own. But going back to AAA studios, it's a teamwork for sure. So whatever you do, if you're a character artist, for example, or an environment artist, you're just one step of the pipeline, and you're not the beginning, you're not the end. So before you, there will be people like the concept artists that will have to create concepts, and then even before that, just the game designers that come up with the ideas for the concept artists. So so as I said, like you start, you take a concept from somebody, and then you look at it and you're like, okay, how can I make this into a 3D asset that looks good? So there's always a degree of interpretation when it comes to taking a concept into 3D. And depending on where you're working, the concept artist might be really, really good and give you like everything that you need, or it might be just whatever, and leave you with a lot of wiggle room. So in my case, I really liked it when it was just a sketch, like a pen and paper sketch, because then you get to pretty much do anything. You just roll with the idea and then you make your own character. But some people like it when the concept is super tight and when there's no mistakes or anything like that. So you'll get, depending on where you work and who you work with, you'll get a wide range of things to work off of, and you just have to be able to take what it is and make it into something that looks really, really good. And then once everybody's happy, and you get to work. So the way it goes is, normally if you're at a game studio, you'll want to get something in the game like really, really quick so that people can play with it, because the drawing is just an idea. It's never set in stone, or at least it's rarely set in stone. So you'll crank out something really, really quick, like a block out for the character, and then toss it in the game. So it won't have textures or anything like that. It might get rigged like really quickly, but you'll be able to play with it and put your character in the game and kind of like see it next to the other ones, and kind of like see the silhouette of it next to the other existing ones. So there's always a lot of back and forth like this, where you do something, you put it in the game, and then you see if it still works. And then once that does work, and once your lead or your art director is like, yeah, it looks good, the silhouette, it's pretty good, you can add the details to that. So you'll start with like I said, like a block out, and then move on to the high poly. That's kind of like the very artistic part of the process, that and the texturing. So during that time, during the high poly phase, you'll get to interact with other people a lot. So it's very important to get the feedback from your leads or from your art director, so that you don't do a lot of work for nothing. Like let's say you do your entire character, and then you do a grand reveal at the end. So here it is. I finished the high poly, and they're not happy with that at all, and they want you to change everything. So you just, throughout the whole process, you're just trying not to waste time, and being really, really involved with the team is a good way to avoid that. Then after that, it's just kind of like smooth sailing until until the textures, pretty much. So you do your UVs, your retopo, your UVs, and then your bakes and all this stuff. And then if you're more of a junior, once you're done with the bakes or while you're doing the UVs or retopo, you might be interacting with like a senior on the team, where they can give you some tips or things how to optimize your topology, or chat also with the animators so that they can tell you, no, this is not going to deform too well. Maybe add a couple loops here, or like move those verts around, or things like that. So you're not doing this in isolation ever. It's always kind of like a group effort where you get inputs from a bunch of different people, that do a bunch of different things on that character, or will do a bunch of different things later on. So you try to make everybody happy. Essentially, that's what it is. And then yeah. So once the low poly is done, once that's in the game, and then you're testing it and it looks nice, from there you move on to the textures, and then textures. Again, back and forth with the other artists on the team. Make sure everything looks nice. Also, always put it in the game or compare it to existing characters that are in the game, so that you can tell like the value, the range of values is the same, or like the same kind of colors, or the same textures, the same type of texture feel to it. Oftentimes, depending on where you're working on, or what kind of stuff you're working on, there'll be templates done for you. So let's say the textures are to be done with a particular look. For on the Heroes team, actually on every team that I've been on, it was like that. At least all the big studios, so that everybody is doing the same kind of textures, right? Because there's a bunch of different artists, and even though they're different artists that might have different style, you still want the end product from all these artists to look very similar, as if it was made by the same person. Otherwise, the game will look kind of funky. So for that, there's always templates involved somewhere along the way. So for characters, it might be you start with a base body from that somebody else, like a senior made for you. So it's very rare that you'll start from scratch. You often start from something that exists already, and that helps also so that everything is homogeneous. And for as far as textures go, you might be looking at a bunch of different preset layers in Photoshop or something like that, where maybe the contrast will be adjusted, or you'll have like some sort of filters on top of your textures once you're done that give it a distinct look, or things like that. So there will be a process that you need to follow. So it's not a big scary place. You're always guided along the way, and it's great because you get to learn a lot this way. And then once you're done with your textures and your character looks really, really good, you put it in the game next to the other characters, and it looks like it belongs, it looks dope, and then you get the okay from everybody. So at this point, after you're done with the textures, it'll always happen that somebody's, like a designer, multiple steps later, will be like, I don't like that, or that doesn't work. You'll really often have to make adjustments to your character, or like add things or remove things once you're done, and that's really, really frustrating. So a lot of the time, like on the Heroes team, for example, we would only use 3/4 of the texture sheet and leave kind of like a 1 of the quarter, like a square, empty in case there is any change to make later down the line. So if one of the game designers decide that that character could use an extra weapon or something like that, and then you completely filled up your UV sheet, and you're like, well, I can't really add it unless I remake the entire character. That's not a good answer to have, right? So you always want to be prepared for the worst, and that was one way to do it. So you leave just 1/4 of the texture sheet, and it makes all the characters kind of like a little bit lower res than they would normally be, because you're not using the full texture sheet, but it prevents a lot of time wasted later down the line when there are changes to be made, and it always kind of happens. So that's one of the ways to do it, or sometimes just leave a little bit of space, or things like that. So that's and then once you're done with your character, you pass that to the rigger, and then the rigger will just give it a skeleton so that the animator can animate it later down the line. And then after the rigor is done, you're kind of hands off at this point. Most of the time, it'll go down, it'll go to the animator, and then there's not going to be much art done, or there's not going to be much changes done to the look of the character, so you won't really have anything to say at that point. But yeah, when the rigor is doing its thing, it's always kind of also like a team effort. Like you might notice a couple things that are broken in your maybe you missed a texture like under the armpit or something like that. So you might you'll go back and forth again with the rigor like this to do a couple of iterations if needed, and then moves on to the animator. And then, you might also be involved in this. So, if you have a strong opinion on what your character should, or how your character should move, or with the things that he should do, with the things that he should definitely not do because you didn't model it in that way. So animators always want to push the rig as far as they can to give it a lot of character, but sometimes it just doesn't work with your character. So, you'll often also have to deal with the animator a little bit down the line and kind of chat with what could work and what doesn't work with your character and things like that. So, and that's pretty much it. So after that, it goes down the pipeline and you pretty much move on to the next one, and then rinse and repeat forever. But yeah, so that's kind of how it goes, right? So you might do more or less of that, but as you can see, it's just there's a lot of back and forth with a lot of different people, and that's normal. So it never happens that you just create one character from start to finish, not talk to anybody, and it's perfect. That's not how it works. So teamwork, super important. It's an essential part of having a 3D art career. And if you don't like people, if you don't like to talk to people, if you're like a little bit shy, or you don't like people seeing your work when it's not complete or things like that, those are all things that you need to let go of, because they'll make you miserable if you try to stick to it too much. You have to work as a unit. You have to work as a team member, and it's never a solo job. So that's it for teamwork. And then about conventions. So conventions are super exciting. It's kind of like those things throughout the year where you really, really get to connect with a lot of the other people in the other studios. And it's especially nice if your studio, if you're working for like Riot Games or Blizzard. Like for example, for Blizzard, they sent me a couple times to to things like Game Developer Conference, so GDC, that happened in San Francisco, and then they send some people to SIGGRAPH sometimes, or other people to CTN. Like the animators often get to go to CTN Expo, also in Orange County. So there's different conventions depending on where you are located in the world, and those are super exciting to go if you're already working in a business, because in the industry, because it's just you get to meet a lot of new people. And then at conventions, there's often like talks of people that are really, really good in their respective field, and they give you kind of like new ways of doing things, or like give you tips on how to better do certain things. So it's always a great learning experience, and then you get to, as I said, connect and make a lot of new connections with a lot of people. And it's also great if you're not actually working in the industry. So if you want to just get there and broaden your network, also a fantastic way to get hired, because you get to meet a ton of people that are actually working, or that are in a position to hire you, or to put you in contact with someone that actually can do that. So so I don't know about all the conventions in the world. Obviously, I know the ones in California. So GDC is a really, really big one. It's the biggest one for game developers. So if you only have, and it's not cheap, obviously, because there's a lot of stuff there. But if you have the money and you don't have a job yet, I would highly recommend that you look it up, or attend, even, because it's it's very rare that it's not going to bring you anything positive in your career. And then the other one, SIGGRAPH. and CTN Expo, and I'm sure there's a bunch more that I'm just forgetting, but those are for developers or artists. It's not for like gamers. It's not like E3. It's particularly for people that create the art. And then the last thing I want to talk about for as far as working in the industry is the health part. So it's one of those things that you don't really care about when you're younger, but as you work in this industry, it's your job most of the time. You'll be sitting down working at a computer, so for 8 hours a day. It's not the greatest. It's not the greatest thing for your body. So luckily, most of the big studios, they'll always have either, like I said, a gym at the office, or they'll give you free gym memberships or things like that, or they'll have like boot camps like they do at Blizzard. They have like trainers that come, and then they do, it's like a boot camp, and you go every night or something, or like a couple nights a week, with the goal of keeping you in shape. And that is super important. So it's one of those things, like at the beginning of your career, you really don't care because you're like, whatever, I'm young, I'm fit, what can go wrong? But as you do that for multiple years, it adds up, and it takes a toll on your body. And it's just, also just your wrists and your hands, and like, you get carpal tunnel if you work for too long without stretching and things like that. So it's really, really important to take care of your body, because that's how, you're not an athlete, but if you mess up your hand, or if you get like a really bad carpal tunnel, or if you mess up your back or things like that, you just can't work and you're screwed. So super important to stay healthy, maintain a healthy lifestyle. So the typical thing you'll imagine when you think of a game developer is just this fat nerd, sitting at a computer like with a bunch of cans of Coke around him, and then weighing like 5,000 pounds. That there are definitely those kinds of people, but it's not quite like that. So for most people that I've worked with, at least all the artists that were on the teams that I worked with, they were all really in good shape. They go to the gym and they exercise and they eat healthy and they maintain a healthy lifestyle. So always, if it's an option, have a standing desk, things like that. Health is super important. So I've always been really active, but there are some stretches like when you crunch or things like that where you sit for too long, or you don't look away enough. And I've heard just so many horror stories from friends or from other people that knew other people where they couldn't work for a long time because they messed up their wrists or things like that, or they screwed up their back and they can't sit, or it's so easy to fix. It's so easy to prevent. So even though this career might look like something that you're just sitting at your desk the whole time, it's not quite like that, and then you can definitely make it into a more healthy, physically healthy job. So I just wanted to toss this in there. Obviously I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but if you want to do this for the long run, take care of your little bud. So that's it for working in the industry. I think that covers pretty much everything. Everything else that I am not thinking about right now, it's probably not that important. There is one thing I wanted to also to mention as far as the job. So when people start a job, or when they're interviewing for things, or they're looking to get a job, they a lot of time, like the time thing, how long it takes you to create an asset always comes back, like that question. Maybe I'm too slow, or maybe maybe I'm too much of a perfectionist and I take too long for certain things. Is that gonna be okay with? The whole thing is that you're likely you're likely slow, yes, but everybody that starts, every junior that starts in the industry, everybody's slow. So it's not like unless you're like crazy slow, or it takes you like 5,000 hours to create a cube, then you might have a problem, obviously. But if you're just doing your thing if you're not a junior yet, if you're looking to get into the game industry, you're completely fine. So you're probably going at exactly the speed of everybody else in your situation, and that's normal. Like when a big studio will hire you, or when we used to hire, when I was hiring people at Blizzard, when we interview people, it's always like people ask how long it takes you to do certain things, and you always I don't know, there's always seems to be a focus on that. But anybody that starts, and if you're tossed into an environment where everybody's really, really good and there to help you and give you like tips and tricks to go faster and things like that, your speed just picks up so quickly the second you start to work with other people. So it's never been a problem for anybody that we've hired. There's never been a case where some guys just it came in slow, because everybody comes in slow, but stayed slow for some reason. It just never happened. Everybody picks up the pace and it's just normal. That's just how it is. So yeah, about the speed thing, a lot of people ask. Speed is not a problem. So you'll start slow. You're expected to start slow, and then you'll pick up from there. Don't worry. All right. So now I wanted to tell you kind of what it is, what it was for me, at least, a day in the life. So I've explained the entire pipeline at this point, so kind of like how you interact with other people on the team and things like that. But me personally, like what it was like working at the two studios that I worked at, right? So I'll start with the more indie version. So when I was back in Montreal working at A2M, or Behavior Interactive. So working at Behavior, which is, by the way, or I don't know if it's still there, maybe they moved, but it was in this building right here, or this one here, one of the two. I think it's this one, the older looking one. So in the heart of Montreal, there you go. So yeah, in the morning, just in my case, I would take the subway and get to work. And the schedule for work in the game industry is a little bit more relaxed than most places. So it's always a range of the time at which you can come into work. So it's never like be there at 9. It's just you can come in as early as you want, and you can come in as late as often. It's for pretty much every studio I've seen is 10. So 10 is kind of like the cutoff. If you come after 10, you're late. But anytime before 10, you can wake up late and things like that, and it's not a problem. And then of course you do your 8 hours. So regardless, so if you come in early, you might leave earlier than other people. If you come in late, you might leave later. But so for me, back then I would you get to work, and then your day just doesn't start right away, obviously. So when you get to work, you get to it was a small team, especially like on an indie studio, where it's not an indie studio, but like on a smaller team where you know everybody really, really well, and those were all like my great friends at that point. So you just you get to work, you say hi to everybody, you chat a little bit, you go to the break room, you grab yourself a coffee, or you go like across the street to the little like cafe. Grab a coffee there, grab breakfast if you haven't had breakfast, which is the case almost all the time. So when you wake up late or something like that, which is my case, you're like, oh crap, I need to get to work or I'll be late. So you get to work, and then after that you eat and you take your time on company's time. So you get to work, grab a coffee, talk a little bit, grab lunch, not lunch, but grab breakfast maybe, and then by 10:30, 10:45, you finally sit at your desk, or sit back at your desk, and then actually start working. So when I was working over there, it would be something like I'm working on like I said, I was working on a lot of different things because I was one of the only artists there, so it wasn't a big production. So I would pick up from where I left at the previous day. So let's see, I was working on like a tree, for example, right? So that's not for example, that's something I actually did. Working on like a set of trees for the environment for the game that I was working on. And so yeah, you sit down, and let's say like the previous night I had finished my sculpt, or not finished my sculpt, like almost about to finish. So you just open your file, you start working on your tree, you're sculpting away. And then once you're pretty much done with it, your sculpt looks nice. In that case, since it was a smaller studio and the art director was a little bit more like hands off, because I had been there for a while and like I knew what I was doing, and I was the one making most of the art for the game anyway. So like everything kind of looked the same because I was the one making it. Then at that point, on that particular team, I would be just like, okay, so I'm moving on to the textures and to the following steps. So after that, after I'm done with the tree, I would maybe show it if it's something that I'm kind of like unsure of. Let's say they wanted like really, really stylized trees or something, like something particular. But if it wasn't, I would just keep going and not really show anybody, because I knew that would be okay at this point. Once you've done it a couple times, they normally like fire you and then fire and forget. So but if you're starting, it's a little bit different. But anyway, so I would work on my tree for like an hour, and then at around noon is lunchtime. So again, throughout the morning, especially, you work on your thing, but there's also a lot of internet going on. So you'll be browsing the internet, like maybe looking at new art on like whatever website, and then sharing things with your buddies, with your coworkers, like, oh, check this out. And then so that's what, like an hour later, when it's around noon, then you go out to lunch. So again, you might, if you're in a big city like in Montreal here, there's like a ton of restaurants everywhere. So we just walk a little bit and then go have lunch somewhere nearby. And it's always a good time. So we stay out for lunch, maybe like something like an hour if you're not working on anything that's too urgent. And then have a lot of fun, and then come back to work at something like 1:00. And then oftentimes we would just play a video game for another 30 hours, another 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So you get back at 1, and then you play until 1:30 to 2 p.m. And you play with your friends, or you play the game that you're actually working on. So it's not like you're not wasting time. Actually, it's just kind of like testing the game if you want. So we did a lot of that, and then after that, you get back to work. So it's probably around 2 at this point, 2 p.m. You go maybe grab another coffee, or to the break room, or you bring back something from lunch or something, and then you keep working. And so at this point, let's say I was working on that tree, and I'm about done with it. So I work an hour or two on it. So it's about like, now it's like 4 or something like that, 4 p.m. And the tree is pretty much done. So I worked really fast on it. Now it's done, and just plug it in the game, and then I would once you have something to show, you call over other people, be like, so this is what I have. Is it cool with you? This is what I was thinking for that, blah blah. And then if there are any revisions, which sometimes happen, I would just go back to it and like do a couple modifications, and then put it back in the game, and then call over the art director again, or the game director, and be like, so this is what I have now. I think it looks cool. What do you guys think? And then if it's approved, then that'd be all set. I would move on to the next asset and then start it, so that I can pick it up the next day and kind of like rinse repeat this way. So maybe at 4 or 4:30, you might have a quick meeting for the team. So they decided on adding a new feature or something like that. So they call everybody to the meeting room, and then we're like, okay. And then we sit down, and they show us a couple things on the computer, and then we're out of there in like in 30 minutes. So what? Now it's like being close to 5 p.m. At that point, you probably go out again for another coffee break, or like another snacks break. So you'll go out either to the break room, or go out again. Go across the street, grab a coffee and something to eat. again, just a little break, and then you come back. It's what, 5 something, and then you work for another hour, an hour and a half, and you're done. So then you go home, and that's it for the day. So as you can see, it's super super relaxed. There's never most of the days that's how it is. So you, as you can probably count in hours there, you definitely don't get to work 8 hours. You work, I don't know, I think 4, maybe 4.5 if you're really productive that day. Of course, there are days where you have to crunch, you have to get a lot of stuff done. So those days you might actually get to work 6-7 hours, like take a really really short lunch break and things like that, and not play or not do anything else. But yeah, most days, at least back in Montreal, that's kind of how it went. So it was really really fun. And even though you don't get to work a lot of hours in this 8-hour day, when you work, you really work. So it's not like you're just kind of like moving one vert and then looking away and then browsing the internet for like 15 minutes, then moving another vert. Like, it's relaxed. But when you get to work, it's work time. You're not screwing around. So yeah, things got done, and a lot of stuff got done. So that was kind of my experience back in Montreal. Now, a couple years later, working at Blizzard, things are fairly similar. It's just like the environment that you're in, like the location of the studio, impacts the kind of like what you do a little bit. But yeah, it's fairly similar. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on this because it's, again, it's a very similar routine. But at a bigger studio, there's a couple things that I wanna talk about. So, and here's Blizzard Entertainment. So this is where it was, and I used to live like not far from there, somewhere around I used to work here. I used to live here, in this little complex here. So yeah, I think it was this one here, like the little house next to the tennis court. So yeah, getting to work, not that hard. You just take a little street, and then there you are. So Blizzard is kind of lost in the middle of nowhere in Irvine, California. So there's not, you can't really go across the street and grab a coffee because there's really like not much across the street. It's just a bunch of other not factories, but a bunch of other businesses. So yeah. So anyway, so how it went, the starting schedule, the starting time was very very similar. It was the cutoff was 10, so you want to be at work by 10, and then in the morning. A couple things that are different. So at Blizzard, we would do daily stand-ups. So everybody kind of moves around and look at what everybody else is doing. And yeah, that person kind of just explains, okay, so here I am. So yesterday I did this and that, and now I have all those things left to do. And then people would give feedback if there's any. So that's how we started the day back then. And of course, each team is different, and like at that point, that got dropped when the team got too big and it went to different things. But with companies like this, there's always like some sort of check-in with everybody, where everybody kind of updates everybody else on what they're doing, so that there's not one single person that's kind of working in a vacuum. So you're always sort of aware of what everybody else is doing, and so yeah, you would start the day this way. And then, so that would be a meeting that's around like 10 or 10:15, something like that. And then after that meeting, that's when you would go grab coffee. And in this case, at Blizzard, I would work, for me, when I was on Titan, I would work on this building here. And then there's a cafeteria on this side here. And so, you would walk across the field here, and then to the other building, go grab a coffee, or go grab breakfast. And then, sit outside, the little tables here, and kind of just, chill with your friends, chat about whatever. And then once you're done, at about like 10:30, no, not 10:30, maybe at like 10:45, you go back to work, and then you start kind of like browsing the internet, looking at a couple things. Again, looking at inspiration. Then you start, you actually get to work on your assets. So let's say I was working on a character. I would do, so, characters for computer games and for like next gen, not current gen games. They're a lot more time consuming than kind of stuff that I was doing at A2M, where it was just like smaller assets that would take me maybe like 2/3 of a day to finish. For characters at Blizzard or any other studio for that matter, where you're working on like more like current gen stuff, assets take anywhere between like a week to 4 weeks, so it's a much longer time frame. And so, yeah, let's say I was working on the sculpt, for example, at that point. So, yeah, during the day, you would just work on the sculpt. So maybe you're like working on like the chest armor or something like that, and that's something that you would do all day long. So that you get to spend a lot more time on each of the different aspects of the character development, and that makes it look better. Because you can spend a lot more time on everything. So yeah, at 10:45, something like that, you would get back to work, and then you start you keep working on whatever it was you were working the following day. So in my case, I'm working on that sculpt, and I'm sculpting away, and then you work on that for like an hour again, and after that you go to lunch. So in this case, at Blizzard there weren't many restaurants around. So you would go to the cafeteria again. Food was never that great, but now I hear it's all better. Or you could go across the street here, and there's like a little food court here. So we would go there sometimes. And yeah, you eat over there with friends again, and then maybe there's some people like playing outside, doing like like playing volleyball, beach volleyball. People go play basketball in the back here. In our case, we would just eat, chat a little bit, and then head back in and again play video games. So in this case, it was Blizzard games for the most part. So let's say like when I started like World of Warcraft, I used to play that, or whatever it is. Again, it's very similar. You play games, you get back in, you play games, or play like Heroes of the Storm. And then, at around 1:30, go back to work. So this is also a good time to before you start working some more, like before you sit down completely, you go fetch the art director or the game lead, and then you not the game lead, but your lead, your art lead, and then have him or her kind of just look at what you're looking at, what you're working on, and just ask, so am I doing okay? Am I on the right track? Is there anything you want me to change before I keep moving on? And then most of the time it'll be no, it's okay, or maybe like change this and that, and then you're good to go for the rest of the day. So after lunch, at around like 1:30, you start working, and then at around 4, another break. So you'll go to the cafeteria. Or just take a car and like go have, I don't know, like a snack somewhere, or go across the street here and get like boba tea, and then you go back to work again, and finish the day like this. And then after work, most of the time, like people at Blizzard they stay around and they play video games. In my case, I would often go to the gym here. There's a gym in this building, and that's how I would end up the day. And then you go work out for like an hour, then you go home. So as you can see, from studio to studio, big and small, it's very similar what you do. The schedule, the amount of time that you work is also very, very similar. So there you go. So that's kind of like a day in the life. And it's again, with crunch time, it's a little bit more brutal. So you do still the same thing. So people don't work more during the day because of that. Because of crunch, you'll just like stay after work a little bit longer, maybe like an extra 2 hours or 3 hours, or come in a little bit later, a little bit earlier. But as far as the rest of the schedule is still the same. We still take breaks in between and all that. So yeah, pretty relaxing. So now, so there's two main topics that I want to cover for this particular chapter. The next one is career prospect and how do you move up, within a company, and then how you stay relevant. So first thing, how do you move up? So I've touched upon this a little bit earlier when I was talking about your salary, but in this case, you start as a junior, for example, and how do you move up from there? So obviously, each company, big and small, they all have their requirements for each of the positions that they have available. So you can always ask and have all the requirements that you need to move on to the next level. So just like a video game almost. And then and then you just try to do that. And after 6 months up to a year, once you're junior, like a year after you've been hired as a junior is a good time normally to ask for a raise and promotion, to move on to regular, kind of like a regular artist. And again, like it's especially if you're a junior, it's really, really important that you prove that you're really motivated, that you really care about the product that you're working on and all those things. So if a company is gonna give you more money for what you're doing and give you more responsibilities, basically they want you to work for it. And it's very hard for a company to give you money if they don't see that you care. So it's if you never play their game, or if you never try to go around and talk to the team, to the other teammates about maybe things that they could improve or things that they can change, or cool things that you think should be added in the game. As a junior, it's really, really, really important that you do those kind of things, that you participate a lot. If you're just a shut-in and you're in your corner, and then even if you do great work, if you stay in your corner and you don't participate too much, they won't raise you. They won't they're not going to give you what you want. So very, very important to participate and to be seen participating. So leveling up in those companies is always like a big game. It's just a game. It's just you have to make yourself visibly interested, visibly helpful, and it's just like that comes with talking to a lot of people and trying to help and trying to give your ideas and trying to give like constructive criticism to your teammates. If you are constantly showing that you're out there helping and like wanting to grow and helping other people grow, then it's really easy for the leads to push for your promotions, because that's how it works, right? So whoever is your lead is going to be the one in charge of your career, and they're going to be the one pushing for the promotion. They're not the one that will actually give you the promotion, but they're the one that's going to go to the art manager or the producer or the game director or whatever and be like, so whoever handles the budget, and they'll be pushing in your favor. So your lead, you should always try to please your lead, because he's the one in charge of your career. He's going to be the one fighting for you to get that raise, to get that promotion. And it's really easy for them to do that, to do their job, and to push for you in your favor if they have a lot of things that they can prove. So if they can go to the game producer, or like as I said, whoever is in charge of the budget, and be like, so you know Mark, for example, you know him because you've seen him around, and he even comes to you. He gave all those great ideas. He's helped a lot of the guys. He's created all this awesome assets. So he's really good at what he does, and then he does even more. So when it's easy for him to push for you, they'll generally do it, because your lead's not going to take a pay cut when you make more money. It's just they want you to keep doing that because it makes their job easier. So it's all like it's politics, of course, but it's easy to play along. So that's kind of what you have to do. And then every kind of 6 months, it's if you're really crushing it, if you're being lazy, then forget it. But every 6 months, if you're crushing it, you can always ask for a raise, or go in and be like, so what do I need? What do I need to do? What more do I need to do to get my promotion? So on the time frame, for me, I was never a junior. I got in as a regular artist, but I got promoted to senior 3 years after I started at Blizzard. And I probably could have done it sooner, but I was a little bit lazy. But yeah, so like a year after you start as a junior, you can ask for promotion if you've done a really, really good job. Normally they'll give it to you, or they'll tell you like, okay, well, we'll give it to you if within the next 6 months you can prove that you can do all those things. And then and then once you get it, it's normally like another 2 to 3 years until you get senior. So for senior, you can always imagine, like, if you've been working in the industry for 5 years, you should be at a spot, and and you've been doing a good job. You should be at a spot where you can ask for a senior position. So that's what I did, and then all those times, like after you get to your after junior, after you get to regular artist, then you can probably imagine that you have another 2 to 3 years to go. Maybe less, if you're doing a really, really good job and participating like crazy. But most people don't, because it's just, it takes a toll on you. But if you're doing a really good job, and, every kind of like every yearly review, you have a really good review and constantly getting like good grades, then 2 years is probably a good time frame after that to ask for a promotion. And then throughout that time, when you're not getting promotion, you can still every 6 months ask for a raise. So ask for more money, and then you should never stop. So of course you have to gauge that for yourself. So if you're doing a so-so job, then of course they'll never give you more money. But if you're really doing a good job and you've just been promoted, of course they're not going to promote you right away, but they will give you more money. Talking about salary, like now the range of salaries that I mentioned. For a junior at Blizzard or in Southern California in general, you'll cap at probably something like 55, 60. And after that, they would have to move you up because you'd be making too much for a junior. And then for regular artists, you start at like 60 something or 60 or whatever, and then it goes up to about 100 probably, and then after that it's senior territory. But you can use those to kind of gauge where you're at and where you should be, depending on your position and how many years you've been working. But it's like every 6 months a good time frame to look at raises if you're really doing a good job. If not, ask every year. After 5 years in the industry, 4 to 5 years in the industry, you should be able to get senior if you've been doing a good job and getting good reviews. And that's pretty much it. So after you get senior, then it becomes a little bit trickier. So there is now Blizzard, we have like senior 2. So you can get that, if you work. Senior 2 is basically kind of like a lead, like a sub lead if you want. But it's different for every other studio. So every studio has their own little like hierarchy thing. So after senior, you might become kind of like a principal artist, or you might become a lead, or you might move to a different company and become an art director there. So it's one thing in the game industry, especially at like big studios, where if you want to progress, if you want your career to move fast, you have to kind of like jump ships often. So for example, if you stay at Blizzard for your entire career, like starting there as a junior, it'll be so long until you make a good salary. You'll have to stay there like 10 years to reach a decent salary, as opposed to you start there as a junior, you get to maybe like you work there for like a year and a half, and then you get your regular position, so your regular artist. You're not a senior, you're not a junior anymore, and then you bounce. You go somewhere else. You go work at like, I don't know, like Riot Games, or you go work for Naughty Dog, or wherever it is that you want to work. And then they'll likely give you a little bit of a raise because you've been working at Blizzard, which is a good company to work at. So you jump ship, you work somewhere else, maybe for like a year or two, and then you can come back or go to another company and then ask for like a senior position or something like that. And then you do that often, like a couple times throughout your career, and that's where like relocation might come into play. But if you jump ships like this, you can progress a lot faster than just staying at one particular company from beginning to end of your career. So yeah, if you're a go-getter, that's what you do. You don't stay anywhere too long, because it'll take you. Yeah, it's just longer. So and then so after senior, it's a little bit more abstract. So your options from there, it's definitely not art related. So unless you want to be like the principal artist at the studio where you're working at, so like the guy that makes all the key, like the main characters for everything or things like that, then you'll want to be the best artist. But moving beyond a senior artist is just it's how you handle people. So how good you are with people, how good you are with leading other people, because you might be looking at like a lead position, or you might be looking at like a sub, like a assistant art director or art director at another studio or things like that. So it just becomes more like your art the importance of your art in your career kind of stops at the senior level or senior 2 level or whatever, and that equivalent. And then after that, it's just your management skills. And then if you want to move up after that, it's just it's a lot of management. So there's less art, more management. So like lead position is like half of your job, if not more, is going to be managing people. So yeah, that's like as far as career prospects, that's kind of where it goes. And then of course you can, if you're really really ballsy, you can start your own studio. If you can find people to invest, or if you're just find a bunch of friends to do that in your garage, or from there you can go become like an art director at like a smaller studio, or it's just after that the possibilities are endless, and it's like it'll be up to you. Like you'll know what to do when you're at that point. But that's kind of how you move through the hierarchy there at game studios. So I've found that from hearing from all my friends and all this stuff, it's very similar everywhere. So it's just it depends of the amount of money that you're able to make in the different locations. So always keep that into consideration. So don't go to Montreal and ask for 150 grand, because that's not like you'll never get that. But you could do that in California, for example. So all right, and then finally, the last thing I want to talk about with chapter 3 is how to stay relevant. So this is one of the big things, especially as 3D artists. So luckily for concept artists, they never have to deal with this because they're not technology bound, but 3D artists are definitely not in that boat. So you have to adapt with technology. So I've seen so many times, working at Blizzard, for example, where like old school Blizzard guys, they just keep doing their thing because that's what their team is doing, and it's been working fine for the last, I don't know, like 3-4 years, whatever, 5 years. People have been there for a really long time, and then sometimes, or like at some point, there's like a layoff that happens, and then they've been doing their like little technique this whole time, but it's kind of old school. It works for whatever they were doing. But now that they're in the open, and now that they're in like looking for a job, suddenly they realize that whatever they've been doing is just so outdated now, and then they don't have the skills that that are needed to be hired again somewhere else. So they're screwed basically. So this happened a couple times, with people that I knew, and it's unfortunate. But yeah, like once you're working somewhere, it's easy to get lazy and to think that it'll last forever, but it never does, especially not in game development. So the projects don't last that many years. It's never like you're rarely looking at working somewhere for more than a few years. Especially it's not like it's not like back in the days where you could work somewhere for like 20 years. In the game industry, you work on a project, you work on a game, and then once that's done, then you move on to something else, maybe, or you get laid off. That just happens often. But so for that reason, it's super important to stay relevant, to do a lot of stuff outside of work, to look at the new technology that's coming out, and to experiment with them, and to get to stay up to date with them. So the most dangerous thing when you're working at a comfortable job, if you find a good job and you work on a project for a long time, is to become irrelevant to the rest of the industry. And it's one of those things that a lot of people do, unfortunately, and it bites them in the ass later. So always look at the new stuff that's coming out. So look at the new technologies, and also try to bring new technologies into your project. So we've done that many times, and we find new tricks, or we learn something new at GDC or something like that, and we come back to work and we're like, hey, we could totally implement that, and it will change a couple things here and there, and we'll have to adapt to certain things, but let's totally do it. And then a lot of the times, on the teams that I've been on, the pipeline just changes. It changes completely from one thing to a better thing, and then you have to adapt that way. And it's you have to do it, and you have to be proactive when it comes to that kind of stuff. So that pretty much covers it. So the staying relevant part is more like a warning. It's just I've seen so many people mess that up, and it's so simple. You just have to love your job, and kind of be interested in the field of work that you're working in, and look at news, look at new things that are coming out, look at a VR, the kind of stuff that you need to do with that, or different technology like photogrammetry, or whatever it is. Just stay up to date and try to learn new things. So it's a career where the second you stop learning, you become vulnerable. And especially for 3D, it's an industry that moves so quick. You can see in the last 15 years where the games have come. I know it used to be ugly crap, and now it's amazing graphics, and it'll just keep going this way. So if you don't constantly upgrade yourself, if you don't constantly learn new things to stay up to date with the current technology, future technology, your career will be very short-lived. If you want a long and prosperous career, you have to keep learning. It's one of those things. So it's not you're not like a bartender with a set of recipe that's good for life. You have to continuously learn new tricks, learn to use new tools, learn to use new software, learn to use new pipelines, completely scrap the way you used to work and work in a different way, and things like that. And it keeps changing it. So be ready for that. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. And that is pretty much what I wanted to cover as far as the 3D industry. So there's a lot of stuff there, obviously, but I think that gives a pretty good overview of what you should expect, and kind of what your experience is likely going to be if and when you get in. So I hope this was helpful. Of course, if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comment section of, for this product, for this video, for this tutorial. I'll be more than happy to answer it. And as usual, if it's something that a lot of people ask, I might actually just update this video. So if there are any questions, I keep coming back. So I hope this covered pretty much everything. I am going to stop this particular chapter, and we're going to move on to the next one, where we actually begin creating the hand-painted characters. So less talk, more sculpting. All right. So I'll see you in the next chapter. I'll see you then.